Welcome to the Stories Are Soul Food podcast, presented by Cannonball Books, the kids' fiction imprint of Cannon Press.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
Hey, welcome to SAS episode 94.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure that first clip goes away.
Yeah. That was not us at
Don't
our
worry.
best.
It had nothing to do with anything SASP.
Oh, yeah.
It was just, we were just game planning.
We're just enjoying the holiday.
Yeah. And also when Brian and I sit down, we chat about all sorts of things. Sometimes there's microphones in front of us when the conversation should not be recorded.
Have you ever heard of a hot mic?
A hot mic? Registered trademark?
Yeah, just beep-boo, beep-boo. Mic is hot.
Yeah.
Couple random questions. People really want to know if you've ever watched Hamilton.
No, I have not.
What are your thoughts
my kids
based
have.
on it?
3 of my kids have seen it in New York.
Oh, wow.
And really enjoyed it.
Okay.
They were, I mean, it's funny, but one of the things that struck them remarkably is that the wokeness, the fever pitch of the woke revolution has moved so quickly, a la the French Revolution, that Hamilton has run long enough now that Hamilton looks really conservative and non-woke.
Yeah.
You know, it's this appreciation of the founding fathers in a very odd way. And it's like, okay, so yeah, it's this pretty awesome piece of art by all reports and wouldn't really stand up to current fever pitch woke tests. You know, it's like that. It's actually, at the time it was like, oh wow, we did the founding fathers all as African Americans. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's interesting. I find that interesting. And we're going to do this new flavor on it all. But then that was this cutting edge thing. And then now
we've cut much further.
Yeah. Now we have, this African American actor playing George Washington, slave owner.
Yeah.
And being respectful and like actually honoring guys who were flawed. Like there are guys who they were flawed, but they also were the founders of our nation. And so basically my kids came away saying it's hilarious. They really enjoyed it. They enjoyed the experience of it. And the novelty and the twist and everything else that was going on.
Yeah.
But they really enjoyed it universally, my 3 oldest, and they also were struck by how politically dated it was.
Yeah.
Even though it's still relatively young, it's already Ronald Reagan.
That's a good description. Yeah. And then
So sorry, I can't say more than that.
No, that's fine.
But,
yeah. The second question, we've talked a lot about, hey, when you should write fiction. And I thought we should apply it perhaps to the conversation on teaching kids about, I've seen tons of book pitches recently about teaching kids about gender and sexuality. Right.
Right.
And almost always people have used fiction as that tool. So the books that I've seen are all books that are fictional or illustrated kids' picture books with a slight story, trying to teach a kid about sexuality, like how God made you. And I was wondering if we could apply some of those lessons to those kids' books. Are they, obviously I'm not talking about a specific one right now, but it does seem to me that they're using the wrong tool for teaching about gender and sexuality.
Yep. I mean, I usually feel that way when they're using the wrong tool for teaching about free market economics or for.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, I have my mission. I'm going to go with my agenda item. And I'm going to be, I'm going to be moral forward, meaning I'm going to have the moral of the story be the beating heart of the whole thing. And that's unfortunate. It's totally fine to have some instructional story and to know that it's completely inferior.
Gotcha.
Like this is completely inferior art. I'm going to do this so that you understand that this is when we put out our trash cans.
Right.
And so this is what we're doing. I get that. And so if somebody wants to try to use story to reinforce gender, I would say you're going to be far more effective handing kids books with very well gendered characters. In other words, classic stories. You don't need the Mr. Rogers song, girls are fancy on the inside, boys are fancy on the outside.
I think I missed that one.
Yeah, you don't need that Mr. Rogers song. You need Aragorn and Eowyn. You need Jill and Eustace and Diggory, and it's like you need all these. Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy are gonna give you way more if you are actually consuming stories that are rightly built on the foundation of the bedrock of reality, the way God made the world. Then you don't even need to. Like it's just
okay.
It's unnecessary.
So almost the bar is too low for a lot of these books, I guess, because they're saying, hey, God made two genders or two sexes, boys and girls, and
congrats. It's way more interesting and reinforcing to give the boys heroic examples to emulate, and to give the girls heroic examples to emulate, and to actually fully explore biblical masculinity and femininity, because it's the real world.
Yeah.
And as you do that, as you explore that in reality, it cuts with the grain, and the kids find their heroes and imitate. If somebody is in a community or a culture where they're going to be susceptible to the trans movement right now at a young age, a storybook, a really like childish storybook, is not going to do a damn thing. It just isn't. You're throwing an ice cube to somebody getting sucked into a volcano at that point. It's like there's already enough gravitational pull that they are confused and messed up at a young enough age that a little picture book is going to help. Then it's done. It's over. Sorry.
And that gets back to the many things that we've talked about. About proof and the nature of proof.
Yep.
You're assuming that what the kid is missing is
information.
Information
will fix it. It's like, no, that's not how we are obligated to believe. It's not how ethos, pathos, and logos work together. The first time I heard The Lord of the Rings, I was 2 years old in a high chair. And, and my parents had discussions over whether or not I tracked any of it.
Do you remember it?
I do not remember a time in my life when I did not know the stories and the characters. Then that's because I don't know how many times I've been through The Lord of the Rings. It's probably beyond counting at this point. I've read I've gone back to so many different sections and just read portions. For a while in my life, it was the only book, the only series I would read. I would just lapse through it until my mom branched me out at the age of 12. But when I was 2 and the discussion was whether or not I was tracking, my mom wasn't sure I was, and my dad pointed out that I would turn bright red and drip sweat during the battle scenes. Like I was like in the battle scenes, I was all the way listening and stressed out.
So it's either jalapenos or
yeah, it was some little habanero action. But yeah, it's really good stories from a really early age read to you, and stories that are beyond you, full of heroes you want to emulate, and just stories written on the architecture of reality.
Yeah,
this is one of those things that you don't need to convince people of.
Okay, you don't think people need convincing of the difference between boy and girl? Okay, meaning it's not the information; it's obvious.
This is one of those moments, and I think Christians do this a lot, where we are. I think I've mentioned this even on the podcast. We are like people whose last name is Disney, and we inherited Disneyland, and we own it. And then some people around us start trying to say things like, "This isn't Disneyland." And we get stressed out and want to convince them and produce picture books to convince them that it is Disneyland. Like, doesn't matter. Like, why does it matter that I convince them? If you are doing this evangelistically, if you're trying to reach the propagandized, the people being sucked into the vortex, go to the source. Like, find the source of the problem. Don't try to fix it when don't think you can fix it when that kid is landed on their face in the gravel at the bottom of the slide. You need to try to get rid of the top of the slide, and you need to try to get rid of the entire slide, which is a completely different fight in a completely different place. So, if we live in a world that is made by our Father, and we do, and he made it a certain way, and he did, and things just catastrophically fail when you go against his architecture, which they do, then as people try to build this new gender thing, it's just going to catastrophically fail very, very quickly. It's just going to go away. And those individuals who are already at the bottom of the slide are kind of beyond help from a story. Like,
gotcha.
If you build a whole world of stories that are deeply gendered, like these are gendered stories because the world is gendered. Yeah. And those stories are effective and compelling and people love them and love the characters and want to be them, then you're already fixing it.
Gotcha. Speaking of the slide, is that education? I mean, is it the public school system? Is this our education episode?
It's honestly, it's everything. It's all the things. I mean, in 2006, I received a note in the margins of a manuscript of 100 cupboards when Frank and Dottie are taking the kids off to a barbecue, and it's kind of this adventure interruptus moment where it's all the stress is building, and Frank's attacking a bedroom door with a chainsaw, but the bedroom door is resisting even a chainsaw, and everything's chaotic. And the Dottie's like, "We got to go. It's barbecue. Like, it's time to go." And right when they're about to get this head of steam, they're trying to break into the sealed room, and they got to go off to a barbecue, which I love doing. I love that stress and break of it's the real life. There's all sorts of times when you're like, when he learns, you're in a zone, you start to learn to throw a baseball.
Baseball.
Yeah, but you're in your zone of obsession, and mom's like, "Hey, we got to go. We're late." And it's like, "But I've got this thing I'm working on, mom." Right? No. Oh, I guess we're going to a barbecue. Like this is the way it goes. But I had in the margins of my manuscript, I received back from New York notes saying that this is overly gendered and we need to degender the barbecue.
Okay, because
2006.
Because wives showed up with the food.
Because
and the dads.
The guys were described as standing around the barbecue and talking, and some women threw some tablecloths on some picnic tables, and implying that they were, setting the feast. And so I just wrote my favorite word in the margin, which is "stet." Let it stand.
Let it stand
is what the Latin means. And it became a good friend of mine through all the editorial processes I went through. But that came back and forth. I mean, that was a note that came back and forth was we need to reduce the gender roles of the scene. My response was, have you ever been to a barbecue in Kansas?
Yeah, absolutely. Or in Idaho. I can't think of that's like an act that is.
But
what
I started with
does.
Kansas because that's where this is. Have you ever been to a barbecue in Kansas? Now let's move on. Have you ever been to a barbecue anywhere there's people? I mean, this is how things work. And so the description just broke along, the architecture of realism. So I was pleading realism, but they don't care. They want to fight the real.
Yeah.
And they're doomed. It's not going to work.
Gotcha.
It won't work. So I'm not really interested in trying to get into any culture wars at all with fiction.
Okay. But that's very important to point out that the barbecue scene wasn't intended by you to help teach what, Henry needed a lesson in. Well, I mean, he did need a lesson in what moms
it's a
and dads.
beat in Henry's journey as a character. And the scene is described with realism around what men and women do at barbecues. And it was not like, I need to find a way to, to reinforce gender roles. Like that would have just been dumb.
Yeah.
It's realism. Now, I do think film can have a little more fun in poking eyeballs and sacred cows and getting into the fight in different ways. Yeah, but in different ways.
Are you thinking of stuff like the Asteroid movie or what What are you kind of thinking of there?
Oh, I think Don't Look Up, is great in all the little cows it tips. You know, it really does go cow tipping. I'm thinking of like Juno, Don't Look Up, Children of Men. Some really great, some really great things where you can get into, because you're getting into the moment, you can get into the tangle of reality in which people are arguing different things. And so different positions and tyranny. If you're watching Enemy of the State, it's about a guy. Like this movie's about a guy, Enemy of the State is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you move from, I think it's Tony Scott. So same guy who made Top Gun
Oh, okay.
So Tony Scott, I'll have to double check that, but pretty sure Tony Scott made Enemy of the State. And you watch it and you're following Will Smith's character. You're rolling with Will Smith's character against intrusive, tyrannical, murderous big government.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the story of Will Smith caught in this, this horrible thing he gets swept up in. It is not somebody saying, hey, I've got a point I want to make politically. The point can be made. Like it can be made because it's part of the real. Like it's part of, what actually is driving the situation and even the tension. If it wasn't real tension, if it wasn't real tyranny, if it wasn't something that could actually happen, then it wouldn't be scary. It wouldn't be compelling. So it can feel like these movies are doing something politically. But they always do it by means of a real and vicariously immersive narrative, not by being message driven.
Why do you think that's unique to movies? Doesn't it seem like novels do that just as well? Or you just think people tend to fail? I'm thinking of like obviously 1984.
I think a huge amount of it. This could seem terrible, but this is. So I reserve the right to retract this later. But my belief is the film cannot help but truncate the complexities of character.
Okay.
And so in novels, you have enough time to really explore, and you have omniscient access to the mind of every character that you don't have on film. You just have film just going through the skin. You have the time in a novel to really thoroughly explore every character, which means your character work has to be far more complicated.
Okay.
There's a complexity to the character. And if you're being honest about the nature of characters in God's stories, that means there's internal conflict and contradiction and incoherence in every character. Like there's contradictions in all of them, where in a film you can have a guy who's struggling with an issue, with a contradiction, but you can't thoroughly explore everything. And so I think because of that, you can have characters who can be really compelling, but they're also more superficially explored. You don't have the time to.
Okay, so it almost allows you to touch on these big themes without being overly propagandic.
The character brushstroke, basically, because the character brushstroke in film is broader. It's a broader tipped brushstroke, and there's less time. You got to get it all done. You can play out a narrative in which you land in Children of Men. So in Children of Men, the film, spoiler alert, everybody, nobody's having babies. Our main character, Theo, whom we are following, has a ex who is terribly performed by Julianne Moore. She's the weakest spot of the film, but still he's got an ex. And then I'm gonna cough at the mic. Excuse me. Coffee drink too. She's kind of psycho. She's part of this terrorist group. And a pregnant girl finds Theo, like through circumstances in this world in which nobody can have babies.
Yeah.
This pregnant girl finds Theo and wants him to help her get to this safe place and escape the tyrants who are all going to try to take her and keep her baby because there are no babies.
Yeah, they want to figure out how to make babies.
Yeah, so P.D. James wrote the novel, and it's a what if. What if God just gave modern man the barrenness they've been seeking as a curse? Like just said, okay, thy will be done. And
yeah, which is a very informational type
Yeah.
premise.
Yep.
Right?
And so
It's almost satire level. Of,
Yep. And so she postulates that what if, but then she tries to explore the real. Like what would happen to humans psychologically? What would happen to relationships? What would happen to mothers and so on? And so women are inviting all their friends over for baby showers for their kittens. They're pushing animals in strollers and dressing up. It's everybody's gone mad because there's no children, there's no hope, there's no future, and there's no place to put your love and affection and protection. And she explores it really thoroughly. It's not a great novel in terms of structure or arrival or where it lands. It's more an exploration of a concept. And that exploration is all very character driven, diving into their psychology and neuroses and all the things that develop from the situation, where the film adaptation actually has this 3-act arc and this quest and this journey to get this pregnant woman somewhere safe. And the pregnant woman and her baby eventually. In the film, Theo has baggage, and we see Clive Owen play a very, very compelling, tortured character, apathetic, wondering what it's all about. Like there's a futility, but nowhere near the complexity and the pain and the agony and the contradiction of what happens in the novel.
Gotcha.
And if you tried to take that level of complexity and pain that happens in the novel and put it on screen in the film, it's all it would be about. You wouldn't have an adventure, you wouldn't have a quest. It would just be, man, this dude's tortured. Because not only are there no kids anymore, this is a guy who backed over his own child in the driveway. One of the last children ever born, and he killed his own kid when his kid was a toddler. And so he's carrying, in a world of no more children, he's a killer of a child. He's a child killer. And so the novel is far more grueling in terms of his psychology and his pain and all of his internal guilt than the film can possibly be.
Yeah.
And I think that's as it should be, because the film is drama. It's a descendant of stage play and it's storytelling, but it's not the same thing as the completely vicarious experience you can give people via fiction over weeks.
Right.
Like weeks long, months long. And because the novel can access all 5 senses of the reader.
Okay.
A good author is able to describe and affect a reader in a way that imprints in their imagination permanent memory of smell, touch.
Yeah.
All the things that you can access there that you cannot access in film.
Okay, so we could restate maybe simplistic message fits the simplistic medium. Simplistic is probably a little bit pejorative, but simple message fits a simple medium in a way that a simple message taken into a novel is
broad brushstrokes.
Yeah.
If you try to have a novel have a simple message, you are fundamentally lying about your characters because they're always far more complicated than that.
Gotcha.
So human beings are far more complicated. And when you have the time to explore them like you do in a novel, you don't have a hero who's just representing something.
Yeah.
He's just representing this message of good, and this hero's this villain's representing the message of bad or whatever, and they fight and the good guy wins. It's always more complicated than that.
So if you take the hero, say, of 1984, there is some complication or some tension between him liking having someone controlling his life, his inability to be interesting on his own, combined with the overweening power of the state.
Right.
As compared to Will Smith, Enemy of the State.
Yep.
It's much more simpler of just like
run
and survive.
Run and survive. The state is bad.
Gotcha. And if you put that in a novel, you would have to do so much more with Will Smith's character.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Right. And now I'm not talking about a Lake House novel, but even in a Lake House novel, you'd have to do more.
Yeah.
It's like even in that kind of pop summer read, there would need to be more complexity there.
Yeah.
And so I would put it this way. I can try to get my finger on this really, really cleanly. In a film, you are looking at someone. You're looking at them. You do not have to sympathize with every character, right? I mean, like I don't need that.
Sometimes we just watch people because they're interesting.
Yeah. Now the actor needs to understand and sympathize with that character,
Yeah.
but the viewer does not. When you actually read a novel that's effectively written and, a really good one, the reader is the actor of every character and has to sympathize with every character in order to understand their motivation and the action that comes. So they don't have to like that character.
Right.
They don't have to emulate or respect or honor that character, but they have to sympathize in that they have to understand the motivation.
Gollum.
And it has to, yeah,
Gollum's
exactly.
a good example
Yeah,
of that.
you have to understand the motivation and you have to see that it is narratively coherent in that person's character. You see which things in their heart they're giving into, which things they're not cultivating, which like where the flaws are and everything else. And you understand like, oh man, like what we do in film is like, oh, let's quickly victimize somebody to land sympathy. Let's save the cat really quickly at the beginning to establish rooting for a guy. We do this quickly. Let's go to a villain. Do I need to understand this Russian mobster? Like, do I really need to get it? Like on a superficial level, yeah, he wants money. He likes money. He likes power. It doesn't have to get
really
deeper than that. Now, a really great film will go a little bit deeper. We'll show you some complexity, some backstory, some interesting brokenness. We'll make you sympathize with somebody unexpectedly, even while your hero puts them down and needs to. Like really great storytellers and filmmakers can do that kind of thing and do it well. But even there, they have to use a broader brush.
But you'd say a mediocre novel has to do that.
Yeah, a mediocre novel has to go deeper into sympathy for characters than a film does. And I think it's because the reader's imagination is ultimately the performer of every role as you read.
Okay.
And so we need Heath Ledger to fully understand the Joker, but and sympathize with that. But the viewers don't have to. They get to look at it. And my grandfather, my mom's dad, used to always ask me when we were staying up there, was like, "Hey, you want to look at a movie?" And I always found that so remarkably demeaning. I was like, why is watching a movie feels more respectful than looking at it? I don't know why, but you want to look at a movie? Yeah. And then he was also taught me some great wisdom early on when I was stressed out watching The High Road to China or something like that at his house. And he would always be the one who would say, "Don't worry, the cameraman will save him."
The camera. That's awesome. And it's just break the fourth wall.
Just break it. Like just realize that somebody's holding the microphone and somebody's holding the light and somebody's holding the camera. And that really stuck with me forever. Like the ability to see a film without the magic on, like be able to pull off and deconstruct it and see what was happening in order to make the scene. Some
might say it ruined it for you.
Oh, it was wonderful. It may have, but it definitely helped set me on this path.
Yeah.
I would. So anyway, that's kind of the long answer to why I wouldn't write a picture book about gender.
Trying to teach gender. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. But I think that you could make a movie about a confused teenager in Toronto. And it could be a great movie as long as it was authentically about that confused teenager in Toronto and the gender issues and the things that were happening around that guy or girl were real. Like that they're real and it's all real, and you're not trying to just preach a message or distill something in advance for the viewer. You're hoping to give the viewer a sympathetic journey through that character, like understanding this trap and these pitfalls and so on. You can do that. You can follow a real character that way.
Was Julianne Moore bad because she failed on that level, or she just did a bad job? Like, how would you fix
Julianne Moore,
the redheaded terrorist from Children of Men?
I would change her diction, her delivery, her diction. She's trying to be heartless, and she doesn't come off as heartless.
Just kind of faking.
Yeah, it was just sort of. Clive Owen managed to have some very real, very compelling scenes in that film, and she did not.
Even though she had the ultimate, "we feel sorry for you."
Yeah, but
she's executed.
Yeah. I mean, some of my favorite scenes in all of filmmaking history are in that film. They're just some really, really good ones.
Which I'm thinking of. I mean, sorry, what's the guy's name? His friend, the weed smoking friend. Albert from Batman.
Yeah. So Michael Caine.
Yeah, Michael Caine.
Yeah.
You know, just a very famous actor. I forgot.
Yes. Right.
You know, there's a few moments in there that it felt so creative in that movie. Or when he's eating with that one guy in the room alone with his kid.
Yeah.
There's just a few.
Yep.
I mean, which ones are the ones that are sticking out to you?
When they're trying to escape this little compound in the English countryside, and so they're trying to steal a car that won't start, and their escape vehicle they're having to push.
Oh yeah, push start
when they're trying to push start the car, and people realize that he's absconding with the pregnant woman, but he's doing so while pushing a really crappy little car, trying to get it to start, and has to that I can't imagine it anything more awful than that. It's really pretty great. So there's
like a dream.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis talks about the different types of fear. It is very much a bad dream, but it's the different types of fear. If you're fear of being buried alive, or fear of being eaten by a shark, they have different flavors. Those fears have different flavors. Yeah. And it's rare that you find a new one, a new kind of stress or a fear. And so little kids have a fear of being chased upstairs. We can all understand that. Like being chased upstairs with somebody grabbing at your ankles.
Yeah.
Like if you're running and hot footing it and somebody's grabbing at your feet behind you and you're it's like we all understand that. Like, okay, this is similar to that, where the fear of trying to escape terrorists who are going to murder you quietly and realizing the car won't start, and so you're pushing it, and part of it is like engine, like he's got this whole theory of like why they're doing this, but they're pushing the car manually. Their getaway car is being pushed manually. They have to get it up to enough speed that they can pop the clutch and go, and while dogs and hotheads, murderers are sprinting after them. And that whole sequence and where it leads is fantastic. That whole drive and the result of the ambush and the fact that they did that. Not only did they have the stress of that car pushing narratively, which was fantastic, they also did it in the one shot, which adds to the stress. So they did that actual chase and the stress of it. They won't break. There's no cut, and a lot of people do the no cut thing just to show off.
But this
is like the no cut thing massively emphasizes the experience of the scene. And so I really like that one. That one stands out a ton. The other famous no cut in Children of Men is also magnificent. A live battle going on, even apart from the no cut, that stops because a baby is crying. Because you're in a world where there's no babies. And so a baby crying brings all these men with machine guns to a complete stop, to a complete ceasefire. Is just incredibly powerful and really powerfully done.
It did, and I mean, it did that early Quiet Place did the same thing where she's trying to give birth quietly.
Yeah, exactly.
Another.
So if a different kind of fear is trying to give birth in silence in a bathtub while a monster that only can hear you is sneaking through your house. You're like, okay, that's a stack of what ifs. That's really quite impressive. And I really enjoy Quiet Place 1 as well, because it does so many and interesting and cool things like that.
Yeah. Well, I was going to get into actually then what should nonfiction do, but we're going to save that for another time, I think.
Like fiction, nonfiction should tell the truth.
Oh, they're the same.
We're done. We can skip next week.
Yeah, there we go.
We can skip episode 95. We're in 94 now.
Yeah.
But yeah, the further exploration of why I hate little lesson stories.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that kind of sums it up. And it's also important to say this is not because there should be no little lesson books. It's just those little lesson books are frequently not the solution. They're not the way to teach.
Yeah. I mean, you said we didn't dig too deep into this, but the problem is the American culture. Or, that's where we are, where the milieu we're in.
The milieu, as the Spanish say.
Yeah.
the milieu.
Yeah, I'm
the
gonna
goo-
get so
the
many.
goo-
We know it's French. Please
Yes.
don't let me know.
In the words of a great Portuguese.
Portuguese.
Yeah. It's the goo in which we all exist is the issue, and trying to address it with the Flintstones vitamins of morality picture books is the wrong approach.
Yeah.
So, and it's not to say never give a kid a Flintstones vitamin, because sometimes they're short. And sometimes the situation is such that they are malnourished and you do need to get them their vitamin C or whatever it is. By all means, give them that little Flintstones vitamin, but stop trying to make food into medicine.
Yeah. It starts with parents, churches, schools.
Yeah, just stop it. Like give people meals, give people food. And it's ironic that conservatives are the ones who do this, but it's just a testimony to the fact that we're morons.
Savage.
So I mean, we are the ones who take a feast. We're the ones who take all this stuff and try to distill it down to nutritional goo. And so, like in the Matrix, when you're sitting on the plane and it's like, oh, the spaceship they have underground, and it's like, okay, we can pump this goo, it can taste this way, or this goo, it can taste that way. It's all just this goo. But don't worry, it has all the nutrients in it. We are the ones who try to distill down to the correct nutrients and then give people a paste to eat. But it has all the correct nutrients in it. It's
and we think that means we aren't supposed to be disappointed.
Yeah, it's like there, all the nutrients are here. This is great. It's super effective, right? It's like, no, this is depression. This is why your culture is anemic, because all the nutrients are here, but there's no soul. There's no image of God here. There's no treating man as man and woman as woman and as in flesh narratival creatures who need narratival food. You've distilled it down to the informational nutrients and lost all the soul.
Also,
completely.
I mean, in the Matrix, that's the given reven for why they get betrayed. That guy is
bad food.
So tired of it.
Yeah, he just needs a steak.
Yeah.
So which I get. And the thing that's interesting is that conservatives are the ones doing this. We are the ones trying to simmer truth down until it's gross. It's just disgusting, and then we try to serve it to people. It's like, just stop it. Set the feast. Like, put out all the food. Like, make it amazing. Make it glorious. Make it something that compels everyone to want to be there. And if you want to be there, if you want to be eating this food because it smells good and it's wonderful and it's filling and it's inspirational and all these things, like there's so much more to that than informational nutrients.
Yeah. Or that Dickens scene, what is a horse? A graminivorous quadruped or whatever. And then the girl who's seen a horse knows what one is, and the kid who never has can define it. Or Lewis, I think, same thing. Cut the organ out and demand the function. You know, we say, hey, here's a heart. Don't you feel it?
Yep. Don't you feel it? And then he also talks about moderns. He talks about the importance, I'm trying to remember where this is, of learning something and getting to know something on the wing. A bird, basically a bird in flight, as opposed to a bird being dissected. Like studying a bird in motion, alive.
Yeah.
In space-time is the way to know that bird, as opposed to cutting it into pieces. And the modern man just wants to cut it into pieces.
Yeah.
I think it might have been That Hideous Strength. I don't remember where it is. At least the theme is in That Hideous Strength, definitely, where he's talking about vivisectionists, people who love slicing animals up into very thin little sheets that can be looked at under microscopes. It's all there. Conservatives do this over and over and over again. Can we simmer it down to the informational goo and then serve it to people? And that is just a blasphemous view of man as a hard drive. Man is a hard drive, as opposed to an image bearer incarnate. Like, we are incarnate words. We are all words made flesh, and we're not meant to be distilled down into little thumb drives.
So we, rather than focusing on a family meal where the husband loves the wife and the wife respects the husband, that feels a certain way.
Yeah.
We want to say, page 1, God created a man this way and a woman this way, and they're supposed to love each other and respect each other, and then want the kid to feel.
Yep.
Okay. But stories the way.
Here's the informational nutrient.
Yeah.
Here's your glass of water to wash it down. And it's just a mess. Incidentally, my son is discovering, not just my son, my older kids are all discovering how strange their upbringing was.
Well, which parts, Nate? Because we knew about some.
All the parts. Like, I think anybody who listens to this podcast knows that I did not hide my kids from media.
Right. Yeah.
But my kids are discovering, they're like, wow, so grateful we had so little screen time. Like look at like all their peers and people they're working with. It's like, wow, we had remarkably little screen time. We know how to go outside. We weren't playing video games all the time. We weren't just consuming massive quantities of shows via radically individualized streaming platforms.
Yeah, targeted to you.
Yeah.
That's another thing when you compare.
Our media was eaten communally, like a meal.
Yeah.
We consumed our media together, like a meal.
Right.
We ate together. Like for them to discover that, wow, it's weird for families to eat together so frequently. It's weird that your mom would be making things from scratch every day. It's weird that you'd know your grandparents and your great grandparents, and that your cousins would be doing the same thing that you're doing, and that and that all this momentum that we all eat together, a family dinner every Saturday night. It's like that we're all doing all these things. And then you add that just to the weirdness of Idaho in general, and to living surrounded by acreage and 3 dogs and gorgeous skies and landscapes. It's a very charmed, idyllic thing. And they're kind of all realizing like, oh, wow, we did grow up in the Shire, didn't we? This is a little bit Rivendell, maybe, where there's fighting going on and people leave here and they go fight and they come back. But
Pullman is Mordor.
Yeah, but it's this last homely house. And so discovering the strangeness, the surrealness of what they had, and that they weren't just passing the time with screens. They had all these family relationships and community and so on. Makes them weird. I think it's easier for them to relate to old people as a result.
Oh yeah.
But that's a tangent.
that is a tangent.
It's like they meet their peers and they're like, who are you? What strange race? What strange race do you come from? They're just not of their generation.
Then a lot of parents are saying, hey, you can watch whatever you want on this, basically, for 12 hours a day. But for 3 minutes of the day, I'll read you this book.
Right. Yeah.
And they're saying, well, no wonder they went with the 12 hours.
Yeah, right. Yeah. As I did too, obviously.
Yeah.
Just everybody's stream glut. So anyway, this has been all about why not to distill stories down to informational nutrients, which has been a theme, I would say. Also, that's don't deconstruct things down, but the thing that happens so often is they attempt to reconstruct a meal from those nutrients. Like, oh, I have these distilled nutrients, and now I'm going to try to reconstitute them into a narrative meal. And it goes both directions.
The dehydrated food approach.
Yep, and it goes both directions. Where here's rich beauty, here's truth from Scripture, from natural revelation, from the way God made the world. Now I'm going to boil it down into a goo and make you eat it. This informational goo with no soul and no incarnation anymore. But the flip side happens even more in in faith fiction and faith film. I'm going to start with this nutrient.
Oh, I have.
And then add water
and
try to reconstitute. From this dehydrated thing. Don't do either of those. Grass-fed beef for your children only.
I like it. That's the takeaway for today, people.
Rare.
Yeah, rare. Yeah.
Okay, that's it. That's episode 94.
We're done.
In which I fuss.
Yeah, in which he fusseth. Hey, it's Brian Cole, your favorite co-host of the Stories Are Soul Food podcast, and you won't be able to see what I'm holding in my hands here, but it is an advanced copy of Sir Bat-a-Lot and the Cranky Danky Dragon, written by Rachel Jankovic and illustrated by Forrest Dickinson, and published by Cannonball Books. Both of them have been on the Stories Are Soul Food podcast, so I feel like our podcast can take credit for this book, right? You won't be able to see the beautiful illustrations reminiscent of Miyazaki and Bill Peet, but I can read you a couple snippets that'll help you understand why Sir Bat-a-Lot should be a feature of your home. In the land of somewhere normal was a town called Boring Plain and a tiny magic kingdom no one knew by any name. But it wasn't always quiet there, not like you might have thought, because the boy who built the walls was called Sir Bat-a-Lot. You'll notice I skipped a page, but that's because I wanted to get to Sir Bat-a-Lot. There's also a dragon who drinks a bitter brew brewed of a boy's whining, and that's pretty awesome. I also ruined the line of poetry there. So just imagine it being so much better. Here, I'll flip the pages and crinkle the hardback so you can hear it. You hear that? Oh, crinkle, crinkle of the brand new hardback. Anyways, it's available for pre-order at canonpress.com. Comes signed and comes with a print from Forrest Dickinson, also signed. So go check it out now for Christmas and the rest of your life. It's passed my kid's test, and I know that next time we have a whining incident, I'll have to bring up the cranky, danky dragon with his heart of hard to please. Until next time,